I do want public ownership for stuff. I think public ownership of stuff for many amenities that we have here in the UK, I think would be very, very good. But one of the biggest problems I have often seen with, for example, the campaigners for these types of public ownership initiatives is, okay, you bring it under public ownership, then what? Because you have to remember, if you are bringing it under public ownership, it's not just the fact that this asset is now going to belong to the state in this case. You then have to show and say why and put your case forward why the state running these amenities from, in this case, we're going to be talking about major rail operators coming under public ownership. There's now bigger drive for water to now be brought back once again under public ownership. Okay, you bring it back into public ownership. How, for example, are you going to improve the services on the railways? How are you going to lower the prices on this? Public ownership is not necessarily the silver bullet people think it is. It's you bring it back under public ownership, and then that's when all the hard work has to start. So there is a lot of stuff that we have to do. And by the end of 2027, pretty much all the major rail operators will be back under public ownership. And now the hard work begins, because we have to show that, yes, public ownership can work. Not only is it a good for the public, it being under public ownership, but the services it can provide are just not as good, but better than being under private ownership. But the stuff that we can do on this is worth having it being owned by the public and it being under public ownership. This is where we have to really start showing that, yes, public ownership is worth it, that you don't just have to leave something in private hands and just, hope for the best. That no, you can bring back something under public ownership and you can improve it, you can improve the services, and it is a net positive for, the British public. That is the argument we are going to be seeing, certainly from and what I would hope now to be advocated from Labour for this, because bringing all these rail operators back under public ownership is only merely just step one. Can they reduce ticket costs? Because I'll tell you now, I've just bought a train ticket to London, and it's stupid. It is insane, the cost to buy a train ticket from here to London. It cost me nearly £100 for a return. If you did that same journey in Europe, it's far, far cheaper. For that amount of money, I could probably get a train ticket that would allow me to travel pretty much all over, like, Europe, probably, if not maybe like all over France or even Germany. So we do need to address these things. It's not just simply bring it back into public ownership. It's okay, it's now under public ownership. What are we going to do to help improve those services? So we're going to have a look at that today. And we're also going to see, is the public ownership of these services that currently are under public control, especially when it comes to rail, because that's what we're talking about today, is it actually working? Because that is what we want to see. We want to see these things not only work, but succeed. So before we go into today's main topic, please do, of course, remember to click on the like, share, and, of course, subscribe button down below. There are links to my Patreon page where you have the Patreon page. There's the Buy Me Coffee link where you can, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button. And, of course, as always, there is the YouTube membership down below as well. And, of course, we've got the QR code up there, which will take you straight to the Patreon page as well. And, of course, don't forget to give the bell a ring either. So let's crack on then into this. So this comes from The Guardian talking about this. So most of Great Britain's major rail operators are now going to be back in public hands. Is it working? So remember, by the end of the autumn 2027, as you can see this map just going through all these things here, unfortunately not interactive, you can't click on them, but by the end of 2027, all the major routes for rail and rail operators are going to be back under public ownership. So you see May 2026, summer 2026, a lot falling back under in 2026. And then 27, autumn 27, that's when all these are going to be sort of fully done and completed. So the majority of Great Britain's major rail operators are, of course, now under public ownership, as the Labour government now continues to make efforts to make the railways more reliable, affordable, and accessible. And that is the aim. That is always the aim. Can they do this? I would like to see a single ticketing objective done. That would help reduce prices massively. I would like to see age restrictions on single use rail cards gone. It's not necessary at all, quite frankly, especially for people who continually use rails all the time, like myself. I love using the railway just because, again, where I live, I've got a really good rail access to two big cities. I use the rail a lot to travel. I hate the fact I cannot get a rail card. It is the most annoying thing in the world, but it would be something that would help, subsidize this. We've talked about buying a subscription for the rail. I would love to see a Netflix type subscription you could do. You pay so much for the year, and it's just like unlimited travel. Go where you want. We've seen recently the new thing that's coming out that you're now going to sort of just scan your ticket, and then that is going to be that sort of going to follow you. That could be very good. We've seen that work very well in countries like Germany where they do it. So we'll see. We will see how this all happens, how this rolls out. So back to this. So the nationalisation, of course, the Greater Anglia back on the 12th of October does represent now the 9th of the major passenger service brought back under public ownership, leaving now 7 to go before the government's deadline of completing every major operator by 2027. The rollout, which is now resulting in the operator being nationalised roughly now every 3 months. It is gradually now beginning to end the privatised system that critics have now argued have now been overly fragmented, focused on profit, and now to the detriment of the passenger experience. Several operators are now already under public ownership by the time that Labour were elected in 2024. They, of course, been nationalised by the Conservatives over the financial woes and poor performance. Meanwhile, of course, Transport for Wales and ScotsRails were each nationalised by the Welsh and Scottish devolved governments in 2021 and 2022, respectively. However, under the current Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, the Department for Transport has now accelerated the pace of nationalisation, bringing 3 operators into the public books since May: South Western Rail, C2C, and Greater Anglia. The nationalisations, of course, very much do come ahead of the establishment now of a new state-controlled company called Great British Railways that is expected next year, which will now manage the rail infrastructure and the services. It is being described by the TTF as now a single directing mind for bringing track and train together, putting passengers and customers first, and now rebuilding trust in the railway. Again, I think that's good. I think the fact that you are now going to have a single mind sort of focused on this, long time coming. A very, very long time coming indeed. I think that will bring in itself some great benefits to this. So back to this. It will, of course, soon now manage most of the publicly owned operators in Great Britain, combining them now with Network Rail, which owns the tracks, signals, and big stations. However, Great Britain Trains will now remain privately owned. Industry insiders, of course, expressed very cautious optimism about Labour's plans, highlighting now the potential for Great British Railways to achieve more coordination and, in turn, greater efficiency. However, experts have also warned that the nationalisation alone may not be enough to fix all of Britain's problems with the rail, given now ballooning costs, which we've said before. Nationalisation is not the be-all, end-all bullet. It is just the start of it. So, back to this. Irrespective, of course, of the ownership changes, the government, of course, got a major headache with the first fact that rail is now gobbling up so much of the public subsidy. And, of course, that is before you even get to HS2, said Stephen Galesner, the Erasmus Professor of Transport and Infrastructure at Imperial College London and former head of the Office for Road and Rail. The government are now, of course, making promises about making fares even cheaper and services even better, but both will, of course, cost the public more money. The data available on nationalised operators so far offers a very mixed picture on the performance. Again, not good, but we want to improve on that. Several, of course, have experienced improving train punctuality and a reduction in cancellations, but performance now of others has worsened over the past year. LNER has been one of at least the most improved, and in June, the rail minister, Peter Headley, described the operator as now a blueprint for the wider renationalisation efforts. So here you can see what's been going on here. So LNER delays have decreased, cancellation have decreased, which again by 1%, as you can see, but you know, that's good. That's 1% less trains cancelled a year. Great. Northern delays similar. Cancellations decreased. TF Rails, again, delays have been decreased, but cancellations have increased. Southeastern, though, increased on delays, increased cancellations. ScotRail, pretty much similar. The Transparency Express, probably one of the worst, trust me, one of the worst railway companies that are out there. Does not surprise me that delays have increased. However, cancellations does somewhat surprise me on that one as well. So, Labour, of course, have very been committed to now bringing the rail back into public ownership. Back in the party's 2024 election manifesto, claiming it can now come up with a way to nationalise trains without costing the taxpayers a penny in compensation. Instead of now an all-in-one approach, nationalising every operator simultaneously and paying off shareholders, the government is now running down the clock on all existing rail contracts, which, hey, it's one way to do it. Doesn't cost us any money, you know? I think that's a good way to do it. And like I say, by the end of 2027, they'll all be nationalised. Next year, there's a lot of nationalisation happening. Instead, of course, the DTF is, of course, now waiting for each operator's core expiry date, which, of course, then allows the government to take over without compensating any of the private companies. The final operator will expire in this way is Cross Country back in October. It will be in October of 2027. This will be when, of course, the government says it will then have completed the nationalisation of Great Britain. Until then, the government has now set the pace of nationalisation of one operator each annual quarter, with West Midlands Railways due next in February of 2026. So here you can see the timelines on this. That is, I think, quite a good pace to be going at, and to be by the end of 2027. Sure, you can do it all in one, but that will cost you how much to pay off all these shareholders in compensation? When you can just wait till the 2027 and it's just been done, it doesn't cost you a penny. Not bad. Labour's, of course, current one-at-a-time approach does, of course, build off the work of its predecessor in government. Several operations, including LER, Northern and South Eastern, who were all brought into public ownership by the Conservatives from 2018 onwards. In those cases, nationalisation was taken now as an emergency measure rather than a deliberate policy in response to financial difficulties in the case of LNER and because of dismal performance in the case of Northern, which again doesn't surprise me. Northern is, again, terrible. It's hard to say which is the worst of the two train operators, TransPennine or Northern. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Additionally, of course, ScotsRail and Transport Wales were also brought back into public ownership by the respective devolved governments, and of course, their train operators are not expected to be merged with Great British Railways. Labour's strategy now for remaining operators is, of course, driven by the legal reality, which experts say will now be very helpful given how fragmented rail in Great Britain has now become. You can't, of course, get it done in one go, said Marcus Mayers, the managing director for Rail and Rail Station Innovation Company. If you tried to merge all 22 companies in one go, you'd have to have the ability to actually build the system to join it all together and do it so quickly. So you build an operation which, of course, now capable of ingesting all these organizations, that is now capable of inserting organizations at a rate of now one every 3 months. That makes sense. So now here's the big question. Will nationalisation improve the railways? This is our big moment, because we have always talked, you've always heard these people who advocate like myself for nationalisation we now actually have to prove that works. Otherwise, if we don't prove it works, then, well, not every, party out there is in favor of nationalisation. If they go, well, nationalisation hasn't really worked, so we're going to once again reopen the rail franchising to people. Boom goes all that nationalisation effort, right? So we have to prove it works. That is the big thing. That is always here the key thing. You have to prove nationalisation works. And this is what we should really want to be seeing and really pushing forward to for something like this to work. So, will nationalisation actually improve the railways? The Prime Minister Keir Starmer has now previously said that his government would not be nationalising rail out of ideology, but because of what it could actually deliver for passengers. He said, "We've tried privatisation for 2 to 3 decades, and it's a complete mess," the Labour leader said back in April of 2024. Everybody who travels on trains has been affected by cancellations and delays. Privatisation was undertaken by Conservatives back in 1990 after decades of falling ridership under the nationalised British Rail. From 1948 onwards, the annual number of Britain's rail journeys on the rail network fell consistently from a peak of more than 1 billion a year in 1950 to a low of 0.6 billion in 1982. After privatization, rail journeys did, of course, recover significantly, reaching a new peak of 1.7 billion by 2017. Privatization, of course, did then spark a new railway renaissance, said Patrick McGowan, the Transport Secretary under David Cameron, back in a speech of 2013. However, the impact now on the aspects of train travel has, of course, been far more mixed. One of the original selling points for privatization was that competition for franchises would bring better value for the taxpayer. While the industry, of course, did remain subsidized overall, some major commuter franchises went on to pay a return. In the past few years, after falling passenger numbers due to the coronavirus, the amount of the government pays to operators in public subsidies has now ballooned to record levels. The government is still forking out £12 billion on operational subsidies, plus HS2 is another £7 billion, plus extracurricular involvement projects, including now on the existing railways, Gaza said. It is a very great deal of money in that context of the public expenditure crisis. Costs, of course, for passengers have risen too. Rail fares have now become less affordable since privatisation, reaching faster than average earnings in that very same period. Today, it costs about £8.90 to take a 50-kilometre, 31-mile train journey by rail, based on how much the revenue the rail operators collect for each kilometre travelled on their network. When adjusting for inflation, that very same journey would have cost £7.54 back in 1994. The rising cost of all this rail comes amid widespread dissatisfaction with the reliable trains in Great Britain. Last year, of course, was the worst now for cancellations on record since 2015, according to the statistics provided by the Office for Rail and Road. Labour has, of course, tried to pledge to improve reliability and affordability with nationalisation, banking now on one unified Great British Railway to end what critics see as an overly fragmented system. And that is something that has been pointed out continuously. Part of our problem is that we do have a very, very much over fragmented system that I am glad to at least see come to an end. But will we get one unified ticketing system? Hopefully so. That will at least help bring down prices somewhat. But again, I would like to see them do more experiments. I would like to see getting rid of age limits on rail cards gone. It's not needed. Most passenger journeys are done by solo people. you know, let us have a rail card, or just give us like a Netflix subscription type thing. I guarantee you, it would be an absolute roaring success. This is, of course, very much possible. That because of now these efficiencies integrated now of track and train, which might, of course, mean that problems, of course, get solved more quickly, Maya said. You may, of course, be taking out a commercial imperative to drive reliably, but you also get more collaboration, which is how it is achieved. So the fine balance on whether it will work out or not is still open for debate. Others are, of course, skeptical about how much more efficiency can be wrung out of the system. Government frequently says, "Oh, we'll make railways more efficient. We'll buy lots of new equipment. We'll employ less people to do the work," Garber said. But the industry has been trying to do that for years and years. and the regulators screw that down to the absolute bottom in their settlements. And I don't think there is a lot, as if it were to be undiscovered efficiencies to actually go for. A DTF spokesperson said that through public ownership and creation of Great British Railways, the government is now fundamentally reforming how the railways are run, putting passengers first. Public ownership will now deliver a railway that is more accountable, efficient, and reliable, resulting now in greater opportunities for communities and significant growth. It is not a silver bullet. The issues inherited from the private sector ownership will, of course, take time to root out, which again, very true. But we expect the public sector operators, the Great British Railway, once it is established, to focus relentlessly now on improving reliability, punctuality, and other aspects of the service that matters most to passengers. We will then hold them to account for doing so. Mark Ilden of ScotsRail, the sector delivery service, said ScotsRail operates more than 2,000 services across the country every year. And every day, around 9 out of 10 of those services are now meeting the punctuality target, getting customers to where they need to be. We're absolutely committed to delivering the best possible service for customers throughout the country. Everyone at ScotsRail works very hard to deliver a safe and reliable railway that our customers can expect to deserve and encourage more people to travel by train instead of using the car. So, hopefully, this will have an effect. I think it will. I think the fact that you now have a joined up thinking of the system will be, I think, very, very much more helpful. How much more helpful we'll see, as it was said there. Um, I think there will be, now that you have a joined up mind thinking, right, well, okay, don't just have to worry about this one route, we have all this too. HS2 still needs to be built. I still think it needs to be really fully committed to, honestly, but hey, sometimes we get what we're we get what we go with and what you can afford. But there are other things that we can go with on this one. I would like to see, as I've said, again, a single ticketing system so we don't have to worry about multiple ticketing things, which is why sometimes your rail ticket costs more than it should do. That would be very good. I would love to see something like a Netflix style subscription to like rail travel done. That would be great. I think the innovation of the thing that tracks you when you use the rail, I think that would be very, very good as well. Because again, you can just go scan it and then scan when you get off. Done. You know, makes a lot of sense when you sort of think about it. But it's that type of innovation where I think we should be looking at and how we can innovate around that. And for please, for God's sakes, get rid of the age requirement for rail cards. Just have a single person rail card. Trust me, it'll be really successful. Anyway, as always, let me know what you think about all this. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.